Hello and greetings from UB. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, we are delighted you are able to join us for today's webinar presentation. My name is Christy Fields and I serve as the Director of Alumni Lifelong Engagement here at UB. And I'm also joined by my wonderful colleague, Joy Rona, who will assist in answering any questions. We are both so grateful you are able to join us today as we kick off many homecoming week festivities. Since 1923, the UB School of Management has been developing leaders and making an impact on individuals, businesses, and communities around the world. In their mission to define the future of management, Dean Iyer has unified the school around four distinct areas of focus: business analytics, social impact of management, business of climate change, innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership. Each of these initiatives are helping to realize their vision of a world of transformational leaders and organizations who change society for the better. With that said, we are excited to welcome today's featured presenter, Dr. Richard Kraude. Richard is an assistant professor of management science and systems in the UB School of Management. He has a master's degree in polymer chemistry from the University of Oregon and a PhD in operations and supply chain management from Michigan State University. He has published several studies on firm sustainability in top-tiered reviewed journals and promotes sustainability in the community as a Master Gardener volunteer through the Cornell Cooperative Extension. In today's webinar, Richard will share valuable insights on the current state of sustainable operations, shedding light on the latest trends and innovations that are shaping the landscape. From sustainable supply chains and eco-conscious manufacturing practices to energy-efficient technologies and waste reduction initiatives, we'll explore how businesses are successfully integrating sustainability into their core operations. We will also leave some time during today's webinar for Q&A. If you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and submit them through the questions section on your screen, and you can chat those to us at any time. In addition, we'll be recording today's session, and you all will receive a copy within the next 24 hours. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our featured presenter, Dr. Richard Kraude. Welcome, Dr. Kraude.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Today, I'm going to be focusing on one of the strategic initiatives on this business of climate change. That's first what we're going to be focusing on. So myself, I've been teaching here at University of Buffalo since 2017, and I've been focusing a lot on sustainability and how businesses can improve their supply chain and operations around the business of climate change, essentially. And it's pretty easy to see so far in Western New York. In October, earlier this month, we saw a couple days that were approaching 90 degrees. And if you remember back in June, with the wildfires blowing smoke over here, there's a lot going on in the climate, and you don't have to even rely on these little examples. You can actually go through and look at the data. One of my favorite websites for doing this, if you're interested, Our World in Data. They have some really cool charts here. And you can see the change in the ice sheets is decreasing substantially. And you can look at all the different metrics you're looking at. Ocean pH is changing. We see temperature anomalies changing over time. And this is a really cool website if you ever want any of these resources. But everything that is apparent is that the climate is changing. Why it's changing or that type of thing is the focus of this lecture. The focus of this is how does this going to impact businesses and what should we do? All right. So what, right? So the climate is changing, so what do we do? A recent study by Newman and Noy was looking at what is actually the cost, right? So this is costing businesses money. Kind of the bottom line is these things are going to have impacts. These researchers estimated that it's $143 billion a year in these extreme events that are attributed to climate change. And the majority of that is human life. And we see this over and over again, these issues happening with hurricanes or wildfires. I mean, down in Maui, with a tragic thing that just happened recently, right? So these things are happening more and more often, and it's affecting the bottom line. Also, just the consumers preferences are changing, right? So you see, look at the consumer trends is going to be driving some of these changes in business. The World Economic Forum has a good quote. They're calling it the eco-awakening for different customers. Kristen Close, she says that brands that deliver on pursuit of purpose, that drive a culture of sustainable innovation, are the front runners in consumers' eyes. And they're watching. And you know how I do, I'm kind of an extremist, right? This is my research, it's kind of my passion. So I'm very much focused on this. I shop locally, textiles. I pretty much exclusively shop at Patagonia now because they're one of the leaders in this field. So the consumers are definitely changing, especially younger consumers. You see this. And if you look at a survey of C-suite executives, this is specifically in the textile industry, but 50% of them say that consumer demand is really driving their pursuit of sustainability above all else, right? So the market is changing and the market is growing. If we're looking at the UK in their market, it's now worth $41 billion for ethically and sustainably sourced goods, which has gone up fourfold in the last 20 years. So the trend is continuing to increase in these type of cells. And it's not just limited to first world countries, because you'll see this in Europe and US is very much focused on this, but also we see in developing countries as well. In India, sales of organic products have grown 13% just since 2018. So we see a big shift in how consumers are shopping, and that's going to be driving what we're actually going to be producing. The World Economic Forum also has this little diagram kind of showing some of their what is sustainable development and what are the key focuses of this. And we can see that there's a lot on the one side looking at the ocean, Antarctica forests, and the different areas that is. There's also a couple interesting things I think this highlights, right? We see global governance over on the right side, which is, really highlighted. You see Apple had to change their phones to have the USB-C, and that was driven by European regulation to limit e-waste. So these are having big impacts to not only just how you operate, but your product design as well. We're seeing energy transition, and kind of going that in the next slide, we can see that the recent passing of the bill, my little thing is over, so I can't, the Inflation Reduction Act, has a lot of different incentives for businesses. Traditionally, we've seen a lot for incentives personally. If you install solar panels on your house or you buy an EV, you get some tax benefits. Well, now we're seeing more and more of that push to businesses as well. So a cool resource, if you go online and see, what can businesses, how can they kind of reduce some costs or take some tax advantages and start focusing on some of these different energy transitions as well. And a lot of times you'll see in the news that there's a climate change is focused on this number. It's 1.5 degrees Celsius change. However, that's a tough number that I really don't like, because it's not really capturing what is really going on, because the world's a big place, right? There's temperatures all over the area. And I wrote an article on this about what we need to focus on is something that's more impactful than simply these changes. But we can see that it's not affecting everywhere equally, right? And that's something that's really important for businesses to focus on, is looking at, okay, where in the world are my suppliers? How are things getting to me? And what is happening, right? So that's where we're really focusing on the firm capability is adaptability, right? And that's kind of, if you look at all the research and what practitioners are doing, they're really trying to make sure they're adaptable to these changes, because ports may change, places have become impassable. Right now, if you look at the Panama Canal has shortages of water. It takes a lot of fresh water to pump those canals full and drain them. And they've had a drought in a usually rainy area, and that's limiting shipping, right? So it's going to impact how your goods are getting there. You also have the Northwest Passage being more passageable, right? So since 2008 was the first time that a commercial vessel actually went over Canada for shipping. So a lot of different trade routes may be altered because of this. So it's a thing to kind of pay attention to and just realize that this isn't affecting everywhere equally. So now what, right? What should we do? What can we do? And how do we accomplish this, right? So if we look at really what is the sustainability from a business perspective, this Venn diagram captures it perfectly. There's things you can do for the environment, there's things you can do for profit, and there's some overlap, right? So no matter what businesses do, they have some impact on the environment, whether it's extracting resources from the environment, utilizing resources just to run your operations, they have an impact, right? That's just fundamental. But another part of business is that it's a business, right? It's fundamentally for profit. And this good quote by Carroll, that the first and foremost social responsibility of business is economic in nature, right? So then really what it's kind of focused on is, you'll see some companies more focused on profit, some more focused on the environment. Companies like Patagonia are a perfect example of where you have really kind of altruism-led environmental movement. But most of the companies and most of where you should focus is kind of in this middle, right? And that middle is where profit meets sustainability, because there are ways that you can achieve both objectives. One of the kind of classic ways to do this is reducing waste, right? The lean and green mentality. There's some seminal research around the early 2000s that were looking at this, and you see, if you are more efficient in your operations, you also are going to be more environmentally friendly. So reducing your waste is kind of one of the first things you can do to do this. There are also other research showing that companies that are more sustainable, they have better employee retention and better employee satisfaction. So when you have better employee retention, you're saving money, right? Finding employees is an expensive process, but also satisfaction leads to better improved productivity of your employees as well. So we see that these things are also go together. Vertical integration. I recently just had a paper accepted looking at vertical integration because you have a lot of companies that are claiming that vertical integration is actually helping lead some of their environmental initiatives. And the reason for that is because you have more control. More of the operations that you have internally, the more focus you can on being more efficient, but also kind of helping your employees. So American Apparel, they've quoted vertical integration. They've reduced their footprint because they're closer. They don't have transport raw materials. They can have different energy incentives, so they can put solar panels on their facilities, improve working conditions. They're going to have stuff that is more focused on their employees, and then just improve manufacturing efficiency. Taylor Guitars has also resorted to vertical integration, and largely it's because the supply chain is not very visible. Right? How do you know that the wood you're getting, especially if you're getting some exotic woods from around the world, how do you know that those were sustainably sourced and logged? And often the times you can't, right? That's a major issue. There's certifications, but again, it's a really difficult thing. So vertical integration has been shown to help that too. Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. If you've ever been there, one of the beautiful facilities out in Chico, California. So really out of the way, but a really beautiful brewery. And one of the cool things about this is that they also have a restaurant on they have a farm that grows a lot of their hops. So a substantial portion of their hops is actually used in their beer that's grown there. And they're fertilizing those hops with compost that's generated on site. So less transportation and just a more circular economy. So going back to how can businesses really tie the loop on their production processes. But of course, that's not completely possible. So you're going to have to keep, finding suppliers that are going to source sustainably produced raw materials. And that's kind of going to lead into the next part of the lecture. I want to show you some of these really interesting things that are happening in industry that are really helping on the sourcing. So one of the first kind of focus is on packaging. Right? Packaging, we've been using a lot of plastic. It's ending up in the oceans, ending up in our rivers, and nobody likes that. I don't know anyone that goes to the beach and is like, oh, it's nice that there's plastic everywhere, right? Well, they're using seaweed now to come up with a biodegradable plastic packaging that actually has the durability components that companies require for their goods. So this Sway is where I'm kind of showing this one here, but there's other companies as well. I think there's like 4 or 5 companies that have products that are actually utilizing right now. And in the London Marathon, they had a seaweed-based product that were like little pods. They almost look like Tide Pods, but they were like an electrolyte solution that you were drinking as you go. You just pop the entire thing in your mouth and you're just going to eat it, drink it. So a lot of cool different products coming out of this packaging. Beyond seaweed, also mycelium from mushrooms. These are essentially the roots of mushrooms. These are a product that is trying to targeting styrofoam. So this product is already in practice. It's being used. So as production ramps up, this will become more available to businesses to try to replace some of their packaging. And obviously cardboard's been around for a long time, and it is another kind of sustainable source. Now kind of shifting to shipping, right? We're going to see that just as how automobiles have been changing and kind of becoming electrified, also shipping is happening too. So Tesla has a truck that has been shipping products for a little while now. We also have Rivian, and Rivian has a large partnership with Amazon. And you probably have seen the Rivian vans starting to drive around and drop off packages. And the advantage with electronifying shipping is that once you have a sustainable energy source, then you can actually really significantly reduce some of your carbon emissions. And it's not just limited to the ground. You have companies that are innovating also air travel. Beta Technologies is one of the leaders on this. They are out of Burlington, Vermont, and right here, this advertisement here, or I guess news article, UPS orders some of these planes. Right, they've tested these. These are working. They are actually using them to ship goods, and companies are buying in. This was from 2021, so we still see that the big changes are coming. And what's really interesting about this technology is that it's going to completely change how supply chains are structured. Right now, we are operated by a hub and spoke system. It's kind of the mainstay for supply chain because that's how our infrastructure is built. You can put things on, like, so if I wanted to ship something to Burlington, for example, from Buffalo, right, it's not going to go directly there. It's going to go somewhere where there's going to be offloaded, put on another plane, and then shipped there, or another truck or train or however it may be. Where we're seeing with the beta technologies, it's going to shift our supply chain so we can get more direct and more frequent kind of flights and deliveries of these goods. And eventually these planes, they'll actually not need even to go to an airport. They can go directly to a UPS counter that could be close to your suburb or wherever you may live. However, the main problem here is going to be in the shipping industry. The shipping industry currently emits 3% of all greenhouse gases. And there is innovation here as well, looking at how can we make maritime shipping more efficient. And Oceanbird is still in early development, but you're seeing that they're going to be creating ocean liners with some fixed sails. And these sails are one way that you can significantly reduce shipping. Now, this is back in the 1700s, how everything was shipped around the world was with wind. And now we have the technology to make it much more efficient again. Get out of there too much. Just wanted to kind of highlight some of those. Also kind of talking about maritime industry, green hydrogen is another sustainable fuel source that could become utilized, particularly for shipping, because there's no way to get around some of these shipping methods require enough energy that batteries aren't going to cut it. So hydrogen has a lot of potential here. It's created from water, right? We live on Earth, the blue planet, with lots of water. So this has a great potential for this, because then once it converts electricity, it comes back into water as well. And the Green Hydrogen Catapult UN initiative, they're trying to double how many electrolyzers are in use by 2027. And electrolyzers are the mechanism that is converting water into hydrogen gas. The real problem with this is that it's very energy intensive. And in order to have green hydrogen, because there's different colors, green, gray, I think blue hydrogen is another one. They're all based on what type of energy is used in order to convert that water into hydrogen. So that's one of the main limitations. It's a very energy intensive process, but with wind energy and solar energy, this is becoming more and more feasible. And there's definitely a large momentum for this. And as somebody who drives a plug-in hybrid, which I think is kind of the perfect stopgap between electric and conventional automobiles, if the hydrogen was the backup fuel source versus gas, I think that would be kind of the perfect automobile and a great solution for just significantly reducing our CO2 emissions. Another technology, autonomous cars, right? This also has a way, some energy efficient uses in that you can change when and how things are shipped, right? Kind of looking at like electrified transportation. Well, they're also trying to automate that as well. I spoke with one of the VPs at UPS probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and this was their main focus. They said before drones, autonomous cars is what they think is going to work. It'll increase the productivity of their employees, not having to go in the driver's seat and get out. But it also help kind of shift when things can be delivered as well, which could reduce congestion and reduce emissions as well. Can't talk about kind of technologies without talking about AI and quantum computers. Definitely, they have a large impact in the world right now. Kind of quantum computing are still a ways away, but we do have some very powerful supercomputers. Summit is kind of the leading one right now, 148.6 petaflops and 2.4 million cores. So very impressive computing power that we have already. And the reason that I have AI and quantum computers together is because these technologies are really intertwined. In my data analytics class, right, why is machine learning so popular now? Neural networks were developed in the 50s, but why they are being utilized now is because we finally have the physical hardware that can actually support them running, and then also critically the data. Right, so we'll definitely look at how this is going to change, because this can optimize different supply route networks, can optimize some production processes that have traditionally been unobtainable, right? This NP hard problem, which just means that there's so many possible solutions that it's impossible to calculate them all with even a supercomputer that we have. So the problem with the quantum computers that we still have some major limitations, primarily that they only operate at very low temperatures, because the stability of the qubits is not very stable. So we have to, in order to keep that from just randomly switching on us, we have to have it close to absolute zero, which is very energy intensive in the size, right? These are going to not going to be in your pocket anytime soon. Quantum computers are probably going to kind of lead and kind of help our cloud computing infrastructure. But the major problem with both of these technologies, right? We see, everybody wanting to use ChatGPT these days. Well, those are running on servers, and those servers require a significant amount of energy, right? And so as we, utilize more and more computing power, especially if we're trying to run advanced diagnostics within our company or trying to utilize some different cloud services, what those are going to do is kind of working against our sustainability efforts because they just use a lot of power. And you see a lot of researchers focusing on this and how can we reduce them, make them more efficient, or also use them for maybe heating water is another possible benefit that different researchers are doing to improve the energy efficiency of these. Robotics, I think robotics is going to be some of the most interesting technologies that are being developed. I recently had a chance to talk to the COO of Zipline and trying to get his take of how this is going to impact supply chain management. And his take on it was that we're going to have a new kind of paradigm shift. Rather than just-in-time logistics, it's going to be like precision logistics. So kind of changing how we might even structure our manufacturing facilities to where we need to get things. And then also kind of the just-in-time is going to be improved even further to be kind of exactly when you need it. Zipline is a really interesting technology that's been applied, it's been used, and it's being more and more applied in the US as it's kind of overcoming regulation hurdles. Agriculture, I think, is really where we're going to see the next revolution. The Green Revolution happened at the early 1900s, and really what it was tractor technology and fertilizer and pesticide technology, right? So what we're going to see is that a lot of these impacts that we had actually had negative impacts on the environment. So we have much more large monoculture, and agriculture utilizes 70% of the world's drinking water. So agriculture is a section where we're going to see a huge shift within robotics, because ultimately the only way we can really even kind of increase our GDP is with productivity. And with agriculture, we're having a lot of issues with employment, right? We're having labor shortages just because the job isn't that good, and no one ever really wants to do these jobs. Why did we make laundry machines, right? We didn't want to have to do that, so we came up with robots to do them. But what we've seen is a big shift lately because of kind of driven by our camera technology, our computing power, because the robots aren't going to be fixed to a single spot anymore. We're going to have robots that are much better at doing kind of general tasks. And some of the kind of really interesting technologies that are out there right now, Tevel Technologies. I'll show you what they're doing. So how do you pick different orchard fruits? Well, usually they're picked by hand. It's a very labor-intensive process. But now we have autonomous robots that can go out there, so they can fly during daytime, nighttime, and kind of all when you need them, right? So you kind of find the right ripeness, so improve our product quality, but also improving kind of the lifestyle of many different farmers out there as well. We also have solutions for weeds, right? Weeds have historically just been using herbicides to control, but now I can see this. Saying things my way. All right. Companies have developed technology to eliminate herbicides. So there's this laser weeder now that can go through a field, and it can identify using neural networks and where weeds are and differentiate them from the crops that they're planting. What this will do is it'll significantly reduce the amount of water usage. It'll reduce herbicides, improve soil health. So a very big improvement to agriculture is possible from this technology. But again, it's still in its infancy, so we don't know where it's going to be going yet. Other interesting technologies, kind of not exactly related to agriculture, but we're going to see more and more of these type of tasks eliminated. Right, this is a robot bartender that they claim have a lot of environmental impacts. How do they impact the planet? Reducing food waste, water consumption, CO2 emissions. So a lot of these robots are going to have different elements. And then there's also this robotic kitchen, Molly's robotic kitchen. I just put the link there for you, just because it's technology I've been watching for a while, because can you improve your operations if you're a restaurant? Well, some of these are going to be kind of instrumental in ensuring that we can have enough employees to retain and kind of meet our operational needs. In kind of one of the last technologies I want to focus on is energy, right? Everything we do requires energy. Primarily the form we're using it is in some type of either coal or gasoline in some form. But we're seeing big changes, right? We've seen wind and solar technology kind of get advanced further than we were even expecting at this point, and more advancements are on the way. And people that say this is not possible to really power it, you can have a much more substantial portion of your electricity from wind and solar than is probably realized. I think Uruguay is one of the leading examples on that. But also nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is changing. We see smaller nuclear plants being developed. And again, France is kind of one of the leaders in kind of shifting their energy uses to this. And the reason that's important is because there's going to be more breakthroughs too. And fusion is kind of the holy grail in this. And when fusion energy finally becomes reality, that'll change a lot, right? Because then a lot of these limitations that we have, especially looking at kind of AI and our quantum computing, we're not going to be as worried about how do we need to make those as energy efficient, because we have a kind of an unlimited energy source. So that'll definitely change our transportation. It'll kind of definitely shift the equation of, should I have electrified shipping, or should I use these kind of e-tolls, the planes that are electric for shipping? Well, a lot of those still have kind of the downside of that they are going to be powered by fossil fuels most of the time. But when you have fusion, that could significantly change. Again, if we have fusion actually feasible in our lifetime is still to be seen, but there has been major breakthroughs on this and recently. But I also tell everyone that we're still not quite there. So I love that video, just because when we think about these kind of things, there's a lot of skeptical. A lot of these things are promoted, but they have a lot of downsides. I'm definitely one of the early kind of adopters of many of these technologies, especially robotics. I've had a robot lawnmower, for instance, for the last 5 years, and it works wonderfully. It's quiet, it has no fumes, but there are some downsides to it that you really see that when you're utilizing them, that it's early technology has a lot of room to improve. So in conclusion, what I love to tell all my MBA students is, when you're dealing with business, kind of the answer to everything is it depends, right? So kind of understanding that, when does it depend? What solutions are going to be effective for kind of meeting these sustainability goals and which aren't, right? And one thing that you always need to do is constantly be kind of looking for new technologies and finding, okay, what are the next solutions, what is coming down the pipeline, so we can be prepared for that, preparing your operations to say, hey, we're going to change our packaging because it's one way that we can distinguish ourselves from our competitors, and it's something our customers are demanding, but also maybe it could reduce our waste internally as well. So improving your adaptability is always kind of a critical thing, but also kind of looking at that adaptability from the lens of, okay, how is climate changing? Where are maybe places that are going to be more impacted or less impacted? How is that going to impact the raw material supply, but also employees, right? There's going to be predicted a lot of kind of climate refugees if the situation gets even worse. Also kind of paying attention to your consumers, kind of looking at their demands and paying close attention to that. And also just challenging some paradigms. A lot of things that we kind of expect is just because that's how things are, but it doesn't need to be the way they will be. So kind of challenging that and kind of being prepared for the future. And then this is one diagram that I created that I really like, kind of changing that reduce, reuse, recycle, to kind of focus on how do you kind of consume and how do you buy. So buy less, buy used, and buy upcycled. It's kind of matching the reduce, reuse, recycle in just a way, because even companies can do some of this too, and how we do kind of this reverse logistics and things as well. All right, so I hope I didn't bore anyone too much. I think half an hour is plenty of time to be staring at me talking. So I want to thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the webinar. It was a joy to be here, and hopefully you get to learn something. So if you have any questions, please let me know now, or you can send me an email or anything later on.
Fantastic. Dr. Kraude, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've learned so much. 30 minutes, it's been great. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for your time. And we have some questions here. And if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to submit them in the question box on your screen and chat those to us, and we'll get to those. But just to start us off here, I'm going to pull up the first question. Dr. Kraude, we just kind of finished talking about, us as consumers and the customers for many of the companies. So how do we as consumers really get the best information on products and companies that are pursuing sustainable operations?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's really difficult is trying to find, okay, what should I buy, right? So you're looking at who can I buy from, and you just have to do the research. So you look at, what are companies doing, and a lot of times they'll advertise it on their websites because everyone's trying to, show off essentially what they're doing sustainability wise. There are also different consumer reports that you can look at to see, okay, well, what are they really doing? And there's a big difference between kind of initiatives and then kind of the reality of what are they sourcing. So when you buy stuff too, you can see, right? Are they replacing the little plastic tags with little rope ones, instead, or what type of packaging does it come in? So those are the kind of things that you focus on as a consumer, and also just kind of be looking out, because you'll see that there's this kind of double-edged sword, and that if you're looking for sustainable products, right? Say I want to change my laundry detergent, I would want to try to do better than that way. Then when you're looking at that as a consumer, the problem is a lot of companies are trying to essentially sell you on the sustainability, but the product quality might not be as good. So that's another kind of challenge, is making sure that the product quality also matches, so that you're not essentially being kind of scammed in the other way. We're like, oh, hey, we're sustainable, but the product's no good. So kind of really focusing on that is something that it just takes time, and kind of filtering it out. That not an easy way to do it necessarily.
Absolutely. And you just touched on packaging. So I'm going to go to this question here that was submitted. Why do companies still use so much heavy plastic packaging? And also, why aren't we able to recycle more of this type of packaging?
Well, first answer is cost. Plastic still is cheaper than any other option. Because the thing about plastic is great in that it makes your products, airtight. You can put it in, it keeps them protected. So that's why companies still like it, is because they want to make sure that by the time it gets to the consumer, that it's still in the pristine quality, and plastic is great for that, right? And right now it's just so cheap to produce. You can produce it, automated factories are producing these things insanely cheap. And then the problem with recycling is, is actually, so this is something that I was doing some research on, and as a polymer chemist, I was in, and the real problem with recycling is that, again, it's a cost issue, in that taking those, goods and then turning them into, new products, they're just going to waste new products, is just more expensive than kind of the alternative. And another issue is that kind of our mixed recycling, right? We want recycling to be easy for just everyday people. But the problem is what happens is when you put your recycling out there, when it's not separated, that's increasing the cost to the manufacturer. So the quality of our recycling, there's grades for your quality of the recycled goods. And when you use mixed recycling, you have a really low grade quality. So then companies that are not going to want to buy that, because they can buy from Europe, where Europeans, they have like 6 bins that they have to separate every single thing. So they're doing that for the companies essentially. So they're recycling, bulk product that somebody's going to buy and remanufacture is at a high quality. So they're going to buy that over anything that we produce. So, even probably for the last 20 years, most of our recycling has just been sold to somebody else, and then usually just burnt. It's kind of the sad reality.
Very interesting. Yes, very sad reality there. Dr. Kraude, this next question here really kind of goes back to the beginning of your presentation. So when you're looking at consumers, you talked about, the consumer demand driving the pursuit of sustainability. So since consumers are pushing corporations to move towards a more sustainable products and operations, is there any way to push that movement faster, or is it simply via purchasing power, or can we impact companies in any other way?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So I actually was reading some research recently to looking at how social media has kind of encouraged, or you can utilize, it's been a little more accountability for companies. But still, companies move fairly slow. The good news is that company moves fairly faster than governments. So usually you'll see them kind of leading some of these environmental charges. But you vote with your money, right? So it may not feel like you're actually having any change, But when you buy things, that matters, right? Companies take notice when sales drop and they will react, right? That's why companies are successful, is because of that. So I always strongly, recommend that, what you buy, make sure you're buying it in a way that you feel good about, and that'll actually change. Yeah, tell your friends about it. Yeah, post on social media. I mean, these things actually do have an impact, and it's one of these things that everybody together doing a little bit has a huge difference. And I feel like a lot of people think, oh no, it needs to come from the government. It needs to be these big changes, and yeah, that needs to happen too. But you can make changes by kind of looking. So, looking at one of my favorite podcasts, How I Built This, with Guy Raz. He goes into talking about a lot of companies. So if you want like details to see, okay, well, who are these companies, right? You can look into kind of podcasts like that. We'll go through and you get to understand where they came from, who the founders are, and what their goals are, and you can kind of see, okay, are they actually meeting what they're saying rather than just greenwashing? Greenwashing is kind of one of the major problems we have as consumers, is that we think we're buying something that's sustainable, but then we realize, oh, I just bought this, it's organic, but it comes in this plastic netting. Like, well, okay, that seems kind of counter to what the whole purpose of being organic was.
Excellent. Thank you there. Dr. Kraude, this next question, I know we talked about, how expensive it is for, recycling companies. But when you look at all the technology you mentioned, the demands, it does demand a lot of research and development, and it seems to be expensive, which would affect the average person at the end. So how expensive is it really for, an average company to remain sustainable?
Yeah, and so that's the thing. There's a big spectrum, right? There's a small thing, right? Or we're gonna, reduce our packaging size. I see that a lot, because when you look at packaging, right, that you see packaging, they try to sell themselves like, oh, you get 70% less plastic use, right? So there's things like that are the easy things, and kind of meeting that again, and that Venn diagram in the middle, right? They're gonna say, oh, well, it's saving us money, so they're gonna be doing that as well. Kind of changing packaging from kind of going to like a seaweed based, right? The cost is substantial, right? So even if packaging is a small percentage, if you're doubling the cost of your packaging, that has a significant impact when you're selling 10 million things. So that's where they're kind of looking at it, is the aggregate cost, rather than, oh, it's only 5 cents cheaper, but 5 cents is a lot of money when you're thinking, okay, well, how much of that is a profit margin and those type of things. So some things are, fairly cheap. It could be cents, whereas other things could be kind of substantial. How you're going to, let's install solar panels on our large manufacturing facility, or are you going to put like some waste recollection? So that's one thing that I know breweries have been kind of slowly doing, is because breweries use a lot of water, and so it's really just, they waste a lot of water because they need to use a lot of cooling for the process. So what they've been doing is installing these systems that are kind of recovering a lot of that water and utilizing it again. But those type of systems cost millions of dollars. So it's just out of reach of some smaller companies, whereas larger companies may do it, but then other larger companies may not even care. So it's really this kind of this trade-off of, how much do you get benefit out of it versus how much does it cost? And then, it can range from something that's a few cents to millions of dollars.
Definitely. And Dr. Kraude, just taking a look to at this next question, you mentioned a lot of companies that are going in that sustainable way. You mentioned Amazon, UPS in the air travel, Tevel Technology, Sierra Nevada Brewing. When you look at the Western New York community, are there any companies that really come to mind that are going in that sustainable direction, or do we have a ways to come?
No, I think that there's a lot of them out there. And I think it's imperative for kind of every company. So yeah, you're definitely seeing some companies kind of changing. You're seeing definitely composting. I know there's a company in Buffalo that has recently started composting human remains and trying to get that as a more acceptable form of, what do we do at the end of life? So you do see some companies like that. But any like other examples I can't really think of. I know in Rochester, there is a company that's kind of leading the way on recycling lithium batteries. So we see a lot of technologies that are out there.
Great. Excellent. We did go ahead and put the How I Built This podcast link in chat. So for those of you that want to click on that at some point in time before the webinar concludes, you'll have that for your reference. But I did want to, I think those are all the questions that we have. I'm just looking over real quick. Yep, we're all set there. But I do know Dr. Kraude did put his email address there. So if there's a question that does pop up as you're thinking more about this, or for those of you that do watch it at a later date, when the recording comes out, his email information is here. So feel free, if any questions come up, to send him a quick note. But I do want to thank you, Dr. Kraude, for taking your time to share your expertise with us, share your time with us. We are so grateful and appreciative. So on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and the UB School of Management, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We are going to continue a special webinar tomorrow. So usually we do webinar Wednesdays. Tomorrow we have a special webinar because, as I mentioned earlier, we are leading into homecoming weekend. So we're going to be joined by UB's Kelly Hayes McAloney and Despina Strategakos, and they're going to share how they collaborated with Mattel in 2011 to create and launch Architect Barbie. And there was a feature in this summer's blockbuster Barbie movie. So we are going to speak with them, and they're going to share some information with us tomorrow. So if you're able to join us, we'd love to have you come on at 12 noon tomorrow. But with that said, I do want to turn it over to Dr. Kraude for any closing remarks.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for attending. It was fun to kind of put these together and share some of the kind of new advancements that are really happening that can kind of shape how companies are going to package, ship, and deliver products to customers.
I find it so intriguing and so interesting. So thank you, Dr. Kraude. Thank you all for joining us. Take care, stay well, enjoy the rest of your day, and go Bulls. Thanks all.
Thanks.